This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody. Happy 4th of July, a special holiday edition of DocNJock. Wishing everybody a great 4th of July weekend. It's a great opportunity to spend time with family, get hopefully some people an opportunity for some time away from work, opportunity to spend some time. Hopefully the weather's nice in Metro Detroit. But DocNJock, we got a little bit of stuff to clean up and talk about with the Red Wings and the Pistons. It's very important. It's interesting because clearly you look at two organizations that are trying to get out of the basement, and it's so weird because the best way I describe it when we get a chance, I'm curious to see what Adam thinks. I think it's going to be very similar, but it just kind of has the feel of going into a store and all the cool shit is super expensive, the nice televisions that are $2,000 that are bright, and then you walk and you go, damn, I only got $50 in the bank. And you got to go down the aisle and you're looking at stuff that you can afford. And it's just this old greasy ass television that's 20 inches and it's, $30 and you're like, shit, you don't even know if it's going to work. You don't even know if it's going to make you happy, but that's all you can afford. And that's kind of what it's been like to follow the Red Wings and Pistons free agency. And it's just been weird because it doesn't feel like we're part of any fun in terms of getting great players. It just feels like, we lost a couple players from the Red Wings roster. Let's just try and go out and find some replacements because of the salary cap. And you just look at it and you say, it just doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel exciting. And I know you can't win the press conference in June and July, but at least you can kind of get a sense that, you know what? It just is a reflection of where these organizations are at. They literally are treading water and bringing in just a basic level talent that is better or slightly better, if that, than what has left. And it's not as fun to watch. It's frustrating because and I'm curious to get your sense of it. When you look at Red Wings free agency, it didn't feel like Steve Yzerman greatly improved the roster, and it kind of sucks when you see Gostisbehere move on. You see Perron, who was special, a part of your power play and somebody that kind of emerged and did some things for you. He moves on, and you replace him with maybe Gustafsson, who's a slightly better defender, but probably equal to or maybe even slightly less than what you had. But it just kind of felt to me when free agency started that it's just kind of been meh. And it's deflating because after the first couple of days, I know more moves could happen. It does not feel that the Wings or the Pistons are drastically better, at least moving towards significant playoff contention. We'll talk about the Pistons later, but starting with the Red Wings, it just kind of feels like Steve Yzerman is moving less than slow to get this thing moving in the right direction.
Yeah, if I was to ask you, is this team constructed today better than it was constructed at the end of last season, I don't think you can say definitively that it is. You might be able to argue that it's about on par. And look, last year's team didn't make the playoffs. At this point in time, we're going into year 6 underneath Steve Yzerman. We are expecting results. We were expecting results last season. We were expecting this team to be a team that made the playoffs. And again, they missed. And what they've done thus far through free agency doesn't really give me any hope of this team really competing with those teams that beat them out last season. When you start kind of breaking down these moves and you start looking at what's going on, it feels incredibly underwhelming. I know when I look, Monday morning, I went into work and I got done with my initial flight. I sat down and I started to put ideas together for our show. And I was excited for the Red Wings. Sunday night, I was sitting there online, and I'm like, oh, crap, we're going to get Stammer. They had announced that Kane had signed, and I was like, we're going to get Stammer. I was like, that's why Kane's coming back, because We've got some kind of magic bullet in the holster, and we're going to go get Steven Stamkos, and it's all going to be awesome. It's going to be great. I allowed myself to get excited. And then as Monday kind of played out, all of a sudden free agency, which, look, for the NHL, it started with a bang. It was huge. It was a firecracker for sure. It was like a finale. It was all these dudes getting signed, big money moving, guys getting traded and then re-upping with the team that they just got traded to. It was crazy. And the Red Wings weren't really in that mix at all. The Red Wings weren't talked about in that mix one iota. Right around 12 o'clock rolled around, and the news started to trickle out that Stamkos had signed with Nashville. And you're like, well, that's deflating. That sucks. Who else were they kind of targeting, or who else were they linked to? Because that was really the big name that they were linked to the last couple of days, especially when Patrick Kane signed. You kind of felt like Stamkos was coming on board, and that was why Patrick Kane signed. And it just, since then, it's really been, I want to say, parallel moves. This has been, to me, one of the more underwhelming free agent periods conducted by Steve Yzerman. Look, you can say what you want to say about last year, right? Last year it was really the DeBrincat sweepstakes, and I still feel like there's a big trade that's coming down the pipe, right? I don't think there's going to be a big free agent that they're going to sign because all those guys are signed, but I think there will probably be a trade that's going to come. There's something else that has to happen, and look, with DeBrincat, it was one of those things that it happened later on during the free agent period. It happened just before the season started. So maybe we get a bit of a repeat of that, but you had a bunch of money. We looked forward to this offseason because we're like, we're going to have some money. Yeah, they're going to have to sign Edmondson. They're going to have to sign Raymond. They're going to have to take care of a couple of their own guys, but you're going to have a good chunk of change. I think when we looked at it, we estimated it's going to be somewhere right around $20 million to go and play with. And it hasn't happened. You haven't seen those moves. You see all these other teams in your division and in your conference getting better. Guys that you lost out on playoff opportunities to last year, you've seen them get better. And it's not like they got marginally better. They got markedly better. They are a much better team today than they were last year when you couldn't make the playoffs against them. So as a Red Wings fan, you're sitting here scratching your head and you're like, what the hell is Steve Yzerman doing? Like, how are we putting this team together? And you look at the moves that he made. Patrick Kane, great. I think we all agree. Patrick Kane on a 1-year deal for $4 million, and it could go up to like $6.5 million. That's a fantastic deal. That's great. All right. But then you start kind of working through things. Eric Gustafsson, you lost Shane Gostisbehere for Eric Gustafsson. Here's the thing. Eric Gustafsson's a guy who, over the last 8 years, has played on 7 teams. Do you know guys who play on 7 teams over 8 years? You know what those guys are? They're not good. There's a reason that they've bounced around the league like that. Yeah, he might be a bit of a better defenseman because Gostisbehere was a bit of a liability on defense, but what he was on defense, he made up for on the offensive side of the puck. Gustafsson is just an average guy at best, and you're bringing him in here and you're trying to sell everybody that this is a guy who can captain your power play. I don't see it. Again, a guy who's been on 7 different teams over 8 years, that's not good. That's not necessarily a good sign. That's not something that you want to try to sell to your fan base. And then you look at what they've done with the goalie situation. Cam Talbot was good 6 years ago. This guy has been on his last legs forever and a day. By the time the season starts, he's going to be 37. You signed him to a 2-year deal for $2.5 million, and you just took a room that was already crowded and murky with average to below average goaltending, and you just added another body to it. And then you went and you signed Jack Campbell, who's another average to below average goaltender, who's probably going to play in Grand Rapids, and he'll probably be the first guy called up because Kosa's going to be behind him because he needs to be seasoned more. You now have like 5 or 6 goalies in your goaltending room. What the hell are you doing with that many goalies? You don't need that many. You need one veteran. You need one guy who can kind of carry your team for a stretch, and then you need your young guy. That's all you need for goaltending. You need 3 of them. You don't need 6. This team has goaltending in abundance. So unless we're trading guys or we're releasing guys or we're moving on from dudes, I don't know what the hell's going on with the goaltending room, and you got a ton of money wrapped up with that. And then after that, it really felt like it was a bunch of two-way deals for guys who could maybe make the team, maybe make the roster, probably going to play in Grand Rapids, though. There was nothing to get excited for except for Patrick Kane, and he came the day before free agency. Everything else that they're trying to sell you on, it's legit. It is chicken it's chicken shit when it should be chicken salad. And look, I don't even need a good chicken salad. I need like the most average Denny chicken salad you can give me. I just need something better than the chicken shit you're trying to sell me right now. I feel like Steve Yzerman has kind of botched this. This has been one of those things coming out of the draft, and the draft was, again, you don't really know what you got for a couple of years, but the draft kind of felt like there were guys who were available and guys who could really make this team better in the near future. And Steve Yzerman went for guys who are a little bit more of a long play, guys who are a little bit more depth. And that's the one thing, I think, the one word that kind of keeps coming up when you hear people talking about what the Wings have done during free agency. They've added to their depth. They've added to their depth. We've got a lot of depth pieces. This is a team that needs to go and get a star. This is a team that needs to add to their top 6 forwards. This is a team that needs to add to their top 4 defenders. This is a team that needs a goaltender who can take the position by the throat and say, this is my position. You didn't do any of that. You didn't do none of that. And I think that's what's so frustrating for Red Wings fans is it just feels like you had money. You had the ability to go out and be a player. You're a team that is on the rise. And it really just feels like you're stuck in neutral after free agency. And to me, it seems like it's just a giant swing and miss.
It is. So, okay, it does have that feel based on what others are doing. It feels like, okay, it just kind of feels like you're treading water. It's not as exciting. What would you say if you were in the room and you had a chance to interview Steve Yzerman? What is the vision? What did they try to accomplish? Because, yes, they filled the roles of those that were left. But, you know, are they still waiting for the blockbuster in Trouba? Are they, maybe they thought that Stamkos would maybe facilitate a trade here or facilitate a signing here in Detroit, but then Nashville just blew him out of the water? Or do you say, you know what? It is to just really make room for opportunities for younger people to be able to come in and see what's going on, and that you can't just go out and get a bunch of free agents when you still have so many in the pipeline that are expected to come in the coming years. So you don't want to have all these lengthy contracts and do stuff like that. So do you say, okay, if you understood what Steve was trying to accomplish, what do you think, if he was being honest, this rebuild, where are they at? What are they trying to accomplish? Because it's just a different era. You know, you and I love the era of, well, we want a Brett Hull. Let's go get him. We need somebody that's great. We need a veteran scorer. Let's go get Luc Robitaille, who kind of represents the Steven Stamkos in the past. But now with the salary cap makes the NHL not fun. It really makes it so that maybe it's actually real, and you and I have been in denial. Do NHL rebuilds, if they're done right, do they take 7 years? I mean, my God, I've said this before in other podcasts, but if it takes 7 years to get a postseason run into the mix, that's kind of, it's like waiting 7 years for a cake. And then when you finally get it, it's like, yeah, I'm happy for it, but I waited all that time. I've kind of moved on. I kind of enjoyed the Florida Panthers run. I've kind of enjoyed Edmonton. Not that I cheer for them, but I've kind of moved on. And I hate to say it, but it's just kind of like, all right, well, I'll peek in it periodically, but it's not as fun. It's not as exciting. I just think that these rebuilds, I just don't think as a fan, waiting 7 years to get a playoff series win is anywhere near how an organization endears themselves to fans. What are they trying to accomplish right now?
Yeah, if he was hooked up to True Serum and he had to answer all of my questions, I would say, what is your vision long term for this team? And did you guys swing in free agency, and did you come up kind of holding the bag? Because it really felt like there was, especially at the draft, this is a guy who doesn't ever tell you about any of his moves, and this is a guy who told you that you were going after Jacob Trouba. And look, okay, Trouba would be nice, right? Especially if New York was going to be on the hook for some of the salary cap that, you know, they'd have to pay here. But Jacob Trouba was a guy who I wanted for this team 6 or 7 years ago. Jacob Trouba at this point, he's probably going to be your 4th defender. And that's great. He's a guy who's got some grit. He's a guy who can bring a little bit of leadership. He's a veteran in the game. He's a good player. He's a good defenseman. But this is a guy who you really wanted here back when he was getting traded from Winnipeg. This is a guy who you wanted here when he was coming up for free agency before he got signed by New York. And look, I think Jacob Trouba specifically had a really nice run in the playoffs. Yeah, there was that one game where he had the lunging elbow against the Panthers, and that was kind of a bad look. But this is also a dude who played the entire back half of the season and made it through the playoffs on a really solid playoff run with half of his ankle missing. This is a guy who took a slap shot off the ankle and the bone completely broke away from his ankle, and he had to play the rest of the year that way. So this is a dude who's got that grit, who's got that heart, and all those intangibles that we as Detroit fans talk about. But again, Jacob Trouba, $8 million at this point in his career, that's not really the guy that I'm trying to hinge everything on. And Steve Yzerman during the draft comes out and throws this out there. And it's almost like feeding chum to the Shark Tank. Everybody starts swarming. They're like, oh, all right, Jacob Trouba's coming. Jacob Trouba's coming. And it's like, okay, cool. So the Wings are going to be players. The Wings are going to go out there and they're going to be players. And it just really doesn't feel like they've ever gotten past that initial move. It doesn't really feel like they are players in free agency. It doesn't really feel like they are players in the trade game. Doesn't really feel like they are playing at the same level as teams like Ottawa, who got better. Feels like they're playing in the same game as teams like Boston, who got better. Feels like they're playing the same game as a team like Washington. These are all teams who were better than you. Carolina, who, look, Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricane are two teams that are slowly becoming my favorites in this new NHL. I love watching these teams play. I think they're great. Carolina got better. You're not anywhere close to that, you know? So when you kind of look at the NHL as a whole, what is your vision, Steve? Where are we going? What do you want to do here? Is it because you believe so much in the draft picks that you have basically down in Grand Rapids that they're going to come up and they're going to make this immediate impact? Because I find when you depend on kids, young kids, and they're going into their rookie season and they really haven't had that level of maturity at the NHL, it's a really tough transition going from Grand Rapids to the NHL. What you were generally expecting, you just don't get. And those guys usually have off years. They usually have down years. What you pencil them in for, you usually don't get. And that leads to a team like yours missing the playoffs again. And this is supposed to be one of those years where it's playoffs or bust for this team. So I'm at the point right now where there has to be another move. There has to be something else to accompany Patrick Kane signing on the dotted line. There has to be something else to what you're trying to do, because the way I'm seeing things play out right now, I'm scratching my head and I'm like, where are we going with this? Like, you know that Sider's getting signed, you know that Raymond's getting signed, you know that these guys are getting signed and brought back. And when I do math in my head, I'm allotting about $16 million for both of them, right? $16 million a year for both these guys. So you have a little bit of money to play with. You can go make a move and bring either somebody in, or you can take on a bigger contract, and you could be an even bigger contract depending on what you trade away. I'm not seeing any dots line up. I'm not seeing anything work its way out. I'm not seeing you connected to anybody besides, like I said, Jacob Trouba, which, okay, fine, but I don't really like that contract, and I don't know what you're going to give the Rangers, because the Rangers are looking to dump salary. So what are we doing here? Is this going to be another thing where you're attaching a second-round pick for a guy that everybody in the league would have just picked up and took on the salary? Because I don't know. To me, at this moment in time, Steve Yzerman's making a lot of baffling moves, and if you are a Red Wing fan, I think you are on high alert, and you're a little bit frustrated by what's transpired thus far. I think that there's a chance for this team to get better. It's going to come through the trade market. I don't know who you're going to get, because right now there's nobody that you're attached to. And I think that is maybe a good sign, maybe a bad sign. Steve Yzerman does a lot of stuff, a lot of cloak and dagger stuff, right? Like he does a lot of stuff in the shadows, and the next thing you know, there it is. I'm hoping that's the case. I'm putting faith in Steve that that's the case. But at the same time, I've got the right to challenge what he's done and not be impressed by it and be quite upset by it and to question his strategy for building this team into a playoff contending team for next season, because I don't believe it's any better.
No, it's great. I understand what you're saying. It's a situation in which, Tyler Mott doesn't get you excited for 1 year, $800K.
No.
But it feels like now free agency has taken a different turn, where it's just to fill out the roster depth. It's not as exciting. It's kind of the Lions way, in a sense. And we've all seen it, where you just get opportunities to get guys that fill the role, and then they really, with the new NHL, it's draft and develop. But it just takes forever. It takes 5 years. We're not going to see the draft pick that they had for another 4 years.
You know what's nuts? And I don't know what you feel about Jake Gensel, right? I feel like he would be a nice addition to this team. I don't know if I really like the contract that he signed, but it's whatever it is. It's the new NHL. This is the way it is. You gave up a second-round pick to San Jose to basically take a contract off your hands. You could have given that same second-round pick to Carolina, and they would have gave you Jake Gensel, and you could have negotiated with Jake Gensel, and you could have got that deal done. And you'd have been a much better team. There are other teams doing things that are, it feels like they're light years ahead of you, and you're just trying to catch up. And it's really unfortunate because Steve Yzerman built what was a dynasty down in Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay has had to kind of dismantle what he put together because they've mismanaged their cap. But you were able to do something down there, and I just don't see it getting duplicated here. And I think that's where the real frustration comes in.
Yeah, no doubt. And then you look at it on the flip side, it's very similar. The Pistons are doing the same thing, and it's even more costlier in the NBA, which is a little more disturbing, to pay Tobias Harris north of $25 million for a 31-year-old, a shooter who's better than what you have, but who disappeared in the postseason. Look, clearly it's better with Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. than it is with what you had, but that doesn't impress me. I'm looking for improvement, drastically. I'm looking at it like, the Pistons are starting in the basement, and they have a lot more guys that are reliable, that can play and shoot better, and that can maybe help Cade Cunningham. But okay, maybe you went from a 14-win team to a 26-win team, and you got a coach now again in JB Bickerstaff that it continues the trend of the Pistons finding guys that have been fired. And the rumors are, it's crazy, is that he's a great coach, great X's and O's, can work with young people, but eventually his act wore thin and he lost the locker room in Cleveland. And that's okay. So maybe he learns his lesson. And like we said before, we said it in previous podcasts, this coach that's hired for the Pistons right now, the guy in charge is probably only going to be hired to be fired before. Maybe the goal is at the highest ceiling that he's the Rick Carlisle, can get to 40, 50 wins. And then you go and get the next guy that is potentially, maybe if the Celtics move on from their coach in a few years and he needs his next opportunity, or you take the next coach that has been, a hot name and you believe can get you to that championship level. It's just, it really does feel, it's so similar with the Pistons and the Red Wings that they're starting from way behind and they're getting there at such an incremental pace, but there's seasons and seasons and seasons being passed that I looked at it and I'm like, okay, you got Tobias Harris, you got Tim Hardaway Jr. I'm not excited about it. I don't understand. I mean, I guess if you're a hardcore Pistons fan, you're excited that it's a little bit better than what you had, but you're still so far behind the rest of the NBA that to me, it signals, okay, you know what? This is year one of Trajan Langdon. He's getting some veterans and some contracts. But when you spend, the NBA, that's crazy. If 31 years old gets you 2 years and plus $50 million. I saw a contract for Max Christie, and I was like, oh, my God. You know what? NBA's back in play for the nephew. I'm like, get your ass out there and stop getting on your phone. Go out there and shoot some baskets. Because if you can average 8 points, you might get $10 million a year. Like, what the hell is up with these contracts? But that's what the going rate is nowadays. I will get your sense of what the Pistons did in free agency and the additions that they made. But before that, what did you make of the max contract that is expected to be signed by Cade Cunningham? It felt like you had to do it, but it didn't feel like to me that he earned it. It just felt like, okay, he's a guy that can average over 20 points, but his durability, I think you needed to see one or two more years if he can be a leader, if he can be around a little bit more. But it just kind of felt like, well, he's the best Piston that you got. It kind of felt like, the old Lions ways where they would give Matthew Stafford a contract when you knew that the direction wasn't there. It just felt to me, and that contract, when you see Supermax rookie contract for Cade Cunningham, it just signaled to me, kind of like how I felt with Matthew Stafford. He's a above average player for who you got, but I don't see him just saying, hey, Pistons on my back, follow me, ride with me, dogs. It's going to be me and everybody else touching the basketball. It just feels like he's a part of a basketball team. I just don't feel like he was worth that much money, but they're according to reports, they're going to pay it.
I think the way you've described it, by comparing it to the Lions of the Matt Stafford era, I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I think that is pretty solid assessment on what this kind of felt like. Like, it almost felt like Cade Cunningham kind of had the Pistons by the balls because he's the best of a bad bunch, right? He's the number one overall pick that you have. He's the guy that you pegged as a superstar. He's the guy that you have to try to build around. And I think that's the one thing that I took out of the coming signing, right? Is, okay, you at least now have a bit of a direction where Monty Williams, but where Trajan Langdon wants to go with this team. You kind of were either on Jaden Ivey or you were on Cade Cunningham's side, and you kind of had to pick. And I think what you have here is you've got Trajan Langdon saying, look, we're going to build around this guy. This is going to be the guy who is going to be the future of this team. This will be the guy that we're going to start to put pieces around. And if you don't fit with him, you're going to be moved. So I expect at some point Jaden Ivey to probably be moved, or they're going to try to repurpose him in some way. But to me, it signaled that this is going to be the course of the future. It's going to be through this guy. Don't necessarily know, like you said, if he earned his max contract. When I seen the news break that they were planning to extend this to him, I was kind of like, all right, I guess. It kind of makes sense, but it kind of feels like they were forced to do it. I don't know if I'd have did it. I wouldn't. To be honest with you, he's a guy who I probably would have traded. He's a guy who I would have tried to package, and I would have tried to have sent him to another team and been like, here, you deal with this. This is yours. Go ahead. Because he's a below average shooter for the most part. So now you're counting on your new shooting guru that you just hired to come in and fix that. This is a guy who can't really take over a game and help shoot your way out of a hole. He's a guy who will try to take over the game, and he's going to try to pass his way out of that hole. He's more of a creative player, right? He's more of a pass-first point guard, which is fine if you have shooters. And I think that's why they made the moves for Tim Hardaway Jr., why they brought Tobias Harris back, because they're better shooters than what you got. So you can put some shooters around Cade, then you should be okay. Until that happens, I just don't necessarily, again, like you, see the vision for the Pistons, and I see them moving at a snail's pace. To me, it really feels like if you're in Detroit right now, unless it's the Detroit Lions, nobody else has really anything really figured out. It feels like the Red Wings, the Tigers, and the Pistons are all in the same box, and they're all trying to build the same way, and it's all, we're going to give it a ton of years, and we're going to see what the kids can do. We're going to let this be a very young operation, and we're going to see what the kids can do, let the kids grow together, and when they finally grow together, we should have something good. You know what the problem with that is? They're kids. They don't know how to win. They don't know how to do professional things because they don't have any pros in the locker room training them or teaching them or showing them how to conduct themselves. When it's kids in charge of kids, if you've ever seen a daycare, it is utter freaking madness. And that, to me, is what we have with the Red Wings, the Pistons, and the Tigers. We have professional daycares for our sports teams. Thank God we've got the Lions. How much longer till Lion season? Can it just get here sooner, please? Because I'm so frustrated with the Wings and the Pistons. At this moment in time, the Tigers are just in the garbage can.
Yeah, it feels like, to use all the metaphors, it's like appetizer city. It's like, okay, you go to the restaurant and, okay, it's good. You got some steak bites, you got some calamari, but where's the porterhouse? Where's the steak? Where's the entree? Where's where's the sizzle? Where's the stuff that people want to order in masses? Where's the stuff that's going to fill you up? You keep giving everybody appetizer. You keep saying, hey, it's going to take another year, man. We're going to get that chef. We're going to get him in here. And you're like, oh, okay, this is the menu. When are you going to expand it? We're tired of the same calamari. Okay, I love calamari, but I want to see that every single time I go out there. You're charging people good money to try and go out there, and it's not fun. It's a tough situation, and that's the thing is that fans have keyed in that these general managers are using the trigger words like, sustained success. We want to do things the right way. We're not cutting corners. I was like, okay, it's not cutting corners to bring in a talented forward that can score 20 goals and be consistent for a couple years that maybe is 25 years old. And I just think that what maybe we're not seeing from Yzerman is the ability to trade some guys and some picks for that person. And I don't know why they felt like they haven't targeted that and why they feel like that's cutting corners. It's like, okay, by and large, draft picks are most valued in the NFL. Okay. The rest are prospects. Like, look at the Lions. They got value out of each draft pick for the most part, except for a couple guys that they've targeted as developmental. So it's a different league. I get it. But the rest in the NBA, second round picks are used and collected to move up to get into the first round to get more talent. But you're finding out that even it's hard to sell the fan base draft and develop when you have the number 5 pick and everybody's like, you're not really going to get the best player. You're just going to get a one-dimensional defender that still doesn't know how to shoot. The number 5 pick, that's what that gets you, is a guy that says, well, maybe he'll develop into a shooter, but he can play one side of the ball. You're like, that's the number 5 pick value? And then it gets worse in baseball where there's 500 rounds. And in the NHL where it's like, okay, great. Because they're saying that second rounders, 20% only make it to the NHL. So what the hell, if you're somebody that's a fan and you understand the numbers, you're trying to sell us on young talent when only 1 in 5 makes it? So what the heck? It just feels like every door we're going down in this pick your own adventure book leads to another year. You go down this way, another year. You're like, come on, dude, forget that. And that's why I think you're getting a lot of angry people online about the Red Wings and Pistons, because I think that we're not saying, hey, in 2025, Steve Yzerman, get the Stanley Cup. We're not saying Trajan Langdon, hey, in 2024, 2025, get to the Eastern Conference Final. But they are both in the same position where nobody believes they're going to win a playoff series in 2025. In the upcoming season that's going to be played. And that's disheartening. And there's patience, but then there's, I think for the wrestling fans, the word that people use is it's audience fatigue. It's fan fatigue, which is I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of hoping that these guys are going to come up and play. There's no, we just need one Connor McDavid where you're like, boom, we got him. He's coming in. And even DeBrincat was a little exciting last year at the deadline, but he faded. Something weird happened at the end of the year, and he forgot how to beat Alex DeBrincat. So that he couldn't carry the team. In regards to when Larkin goes down, DeBrincat faded. It was weird. So I just think that, there's a lot of fatigue with fans, and, we're sitting here kind of scratching our head going, you could get a little bit more. You don't have to buy the $2,000 TV, but you could buy the $800 one. You could kind of take a loan out and say, okay, maybe I'll pay a couple of bucks here and there extra and figure it out, so that's just kind of where everybody's at. And, we don't want to upset too many people on this holiday, but it's just patience. These teams are asking a lot of patience, and we'll see as the coming months, and days ahead as we evaluate more moves that are made. But man, that's a lot of patience to bestow and ask from your fan base in regards to the talent acquisition and the way these teams are built. But luckily, Lions training camp is only 3 weeks away. We'll start to talk about it a little bit next week, and then in 2 weeks, we'll present more training camp information and all the stuff that we're going to break down ahead of the team that's expected to at least maybe overshadow everybody their run in 2024. Cuz, what are you doing today? 4th of July? What are you going to try to be doing? Is it a relaxing day, or what are you going to try and do?
I'm going to sleep in a little bit, and if the baby lets me.
Yes.
And then it's just going to be one of those days, man. Maybe just kind of grill around the house.
Yep.
You know, Dad's not doing well right now, so we might be back and forth to the hospital. Not sure. We'll kind of see what happens. Maybe he gets released. But
hopefully.
it's just going to be one of those things. It's going to be kind of a chill day.
I will say this. I watched Beverly Hills Cop 4. It was enjoyable. I have a little bit less stuff to do with the practice, so I've just been hanging around the house, just doing a little bit of writing in the morning and podcasting around this time, and then just kind of laying low, just recuperating. It's been great watching a lot of stuff. If you have HBO Max, the off-season Hard Knocks was exquisite. You got a little insight into talk of how general managers talk about players with their staff. It was really good to see how they broke down the thoughts about Saquon Barkley. It was spectacular. I loved it. Some good stuff going on. Been watching some stuff on Netflix and some stuff like that. So yeah, just chilling, trying to keep low, lay low as this week. I love the first week of July. It's just always fun, especially with the kids, and now they're off too. So it's a great opportunity to relax and do other stuff besides sports while maintaining an eye on what's going on with these teams that are taking forever to acquire talent that can play on a consistent basis. Cuz, hope you have a great 4th. Hope everybody out there has a great 4th of July. Barbecue, eat, drink, do your thing. Make sure you wear your sunscreen, and call your Ubers if you're having a good time. Don't get in trouble. And we look forward for everybody to come back and listen next week as well. Anywhere that you listen to your favorite audio content, type in Detroit Sports Podcast. Our content will find you. And it's been great to be able to feature player interviews with the Lions, talking about professional wrestling, basketball, hockey, whatever it is that involves Detroit sports. We're all about it at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I can't wait to fire it up next week on the next edition of Doc and Jock.